It was July 27th, 1973, that the FCC granted a construction permit for a license for a brand new FM radio station in the Pacific Northwest. That station would go on to become KGRG for Green River Community College, now Green River College. This started a historical 50 years, still going on today. This station run by some incredible broadcasters, coaches, facilitators, and we're going to talk with some of them today. It's the 30th anniversary of the format Today's Rock, which KGRG has been doing, but it's the 50th anniversary. Let's welcome everybody, starting with Tom Evans Krause, right?
Yep.
I said your name right.
Yeah, well done.
Your radio name was just Tom Evans for all those years.
For all those years, yep. Yeah, if you asked anybody in the industry, do you know Tom Krause? They'd go, who? Because there's always Tom Evans for all those years.
By design to keep all your rabid fans from not finding you, or?
Yeah, that and the unlisted phone number for my home.
Yeah. Tom, we're going to talk a little more, but Tom literally is the heart, the soul, the godfather, the coach, the mentor to 27 years of young people, and some not so young, who wanted to learn about communications and broadcasting. And Tom was a mentor to me as well. So Tom ran the place. Charlie Harger, who is now the news director of Cairo News Radio and an alumnus and teacher for how many years at KGRG?
I taught for over 20 years at Green River College with our AM station, our podcasting offering. So, yeah, a long time. Started in 2001.
Right. And John Kasprick is the guy you call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, when something needs fixing. And John, you've been there pretty close to since the beginning, right?
Yeah, I actually started there in 78, so I'm looking at 45 years there. Wow.
Yeah. When Tom Evans goes, wow, that's wow. That's a long time. And you're the chief engineer. You have seen, all of you have seen so much change over the years. Let's start with the very beginning of the radio station. And John, maybe you can tell us a little bit about, since you were there for 45 years.
Well, the beginning actually predates me just a little bit. Shortly after the college opened, there was a radio club, of course, and some of the students decided, well, that it would be fun to broadcast our music and announcements and those kind of things. Well, all they had was a PA system in the courtyard. Maybe they could hook up to the wired PA system throughout the buildings, but that was good enough for a while. But then the FCC, of course, opened up the non-commercial FM opportunities, and in 72, they started the process of filing for an actual FM license. And
back in the 70s, boy, music was exploding too. What was the first format that the station signed on with? Was it like a progressive rock thing, and then became Today's Rock? Tom, do you know?
To my knowledge, it was an album-oriented rock or progressive rock format in those early days. So the license actually, if I remember correctly, was granted by the FCC in December of 1974. And during that era, of course, you had all of those bands like the Doobie Brothers and Leonard Skinner and all the rest. And I believe that was the material that was played on the air back then.
And back then, and to this day, because of you guys, it's this cool at a college to have a radio station. But back then, it was a cultural center that everybody felt like a part of, because there was no internet, there was no social media, there was no competition for a place to hang and feel like part of the students. Charlie, when did you arrive?
Started in the summer of '96. So Tom had been there just about a year and a half, 2 years as an instructor. And we were really, I guess, the second generation after the Today's Rock format rolled out. So if the initial folks in 89, 90 were the original cast of SNL, yes. We were the Joe Piscopos. So we had a great time. It was still so much energy at the station. This is as Tom's leadership and our abilities were ascending. So here we were getting nominated for national awards, getting a lot of local media attention. We get written up in different papers all the time. It was a great time to be part of such a station and such a format.
Let's talk about I shouldn't say the kids, because at Green River College is a wide range, but they're all kids to us now at this age, right?
Yes.
Let's tell some stories about some exceptional students that you remember. And I know there are some who went on to have hugely successful traditional broadcast careers. We certainly want to mention those, but also just some incredible people who demonstrated demonstrated leadership and became mentors to other. And I guess I'll leave that open to all three of you to maybe pick one each. And I should pick one of you to go first. Charlie, go ahead.
Boy.
I'll start. And I think of just some of the folks that we've seen come through the station, not only, as a colleague, watching guys like Bob Van Dyne take over as DJ No Name, doing the morning show on the end after being our morning show guy on KGRG. We have people like Big Daddy Nelson, Ryan Nelson, who's still out there traveling America as a morning man on different country stations. And what you see as a common thread are a couple things. First of all, you have a passion for broadcasting. These are the types of people who could not function without doing a show
in the real world. Yes.
And so they're either doing it while they're working at Domino's Pizza, or they are coming to college radio, applying the skills, the humor, and building those skills to where they can be professionals. I mentioned the two of them. There are countless other people who have come through the program. Not only were they wonderful broadcasters, but they transferred those skills, those life skills that they learned from communicating over the radio, and they're doing great behind the scenes. I know a guy who heads up advertising for McDonald's regionally, and he started at KGRG. So a wide variety of people come through and learn a lot of skills.
That's the interesting thing, is that the ability to communicate effectively, tell stories, engage people is a life skill. It's in fact, now that everybody has their own smartphone and they have their own multimedia distribution platform, everybody needs this skill. Let's go to Tom next. You can't mention everybody, I know, but just spotlight a couple of people. And you know who I'm going to spotlight.
Yes.
For last. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. It is very difficult for me to even spotlight a few select students who have gone on to great things. One of the beauties of the program, in my view, was that we opened it up to everybody that was attending Green River. Students that were in completely different disciplines that just wanted to try their hand of being on the air and learning, a few things about the broadcast field and so forth. So I did an estimate over my 27 plus years that there were probably somewhere in the vicinity of 4,000 students who came through the program in the various classes that we offer. And also, we did tracking, of course, of students who wish to pursue broadcasting as a career, getting a paycheck, whether it was part-time as a street team member or, working their way up to being the music director of one of the biggest stations in America, KISS FM in Los Angeles, and many others who wound up pursuing great careers. So in the terms of the tracking, I estimated that there were somewhere between 300 and 400 students who received some sort of paycheck from the broadcast business, or one of the related fields like the record industry. We had one of our music directors go off to be a national rep for a record label out of LA. And over and above broadcasting, many students, wound up pursuing other professions. For example, one of our students wound up going to medical school, became a doctor. And just, I think the communication skills they learned from Charlie. John also teaches part-time as well, besides being chief engineer, and our other instructors that we should mention, of course. And I know, Bob, that one of them in particular is somebody near and dear to your heart.
Well, we all would.
But yeah. But to be able to just pick a couple. I mean, one of them is actually part of this broadcast right now, this podcast, in terms of somebody who went on to great success. So.
Well,
Charlie,
yes,
of course.
Charlie, if you have to pick one, pick the one that's looking at you. As you said. Absolutely.
That's right. He's right there.
And right after I asked that question, I realized that's impossible for Tom, because Tom, I watched you. I watched A Day in the Life so many times, and you loved each and every student as an equal. Like, you would never put one above another. Whereas I'm all about name dropping. I want to hear, but that's really the beauty of what you did there. Give me just a little bit. Just think back to a day in the life of Tom Evans that involves the radio station, things that might happen, might go wrong. How you would sit in your office and there would be a stream of people in and out, and then you'd go and then you'd come back. Just give me a little bit of an example of what it was like.
Well, I'll start by saying that when we first moved to the Pacific Northwest from Florida, I actually had a consulting business, and it was a sole proprietor, and I was consulting radio stations around the country, usually in middle and smaller markets, places like Monterey, Salinas, Rockford, Illinois, and so forth. Also working with some of the record labels as well. And then dusted off my long-lost, never-used teaching degree from college when I saw an ad for, hey, we're looking for somebody for the broadcast program at Green River. Well, I live in Linwood, which is the far north suburb of the Seattle metro. Auburn, of course, is in the very south part of King County. It's like 50 miles from my house. But I sent in the resume anyway. I got interviewed. Obviously, they selected me. And I figured, okay, well, I'll do maybe a year or two of this commute, 100-mile round trip through downtown Seattle and back. Turns out that I really enjoyed teaching. Working with young people, and our industry, the broadcast industry, especially on the consultant side, changed dramatically in the late 90s and early 2000s. And also the school made it worth my while. But the bottom line was that I love students.
Yeah. And
working with the program and sharing whatever I could share, and not just about broadcasting, but a lot of times life issues that students were facing. So
you had spent 17 years in radio before starting this.
Yeah, 17 years in radio and then 4 consulting. As it turns out, the Green River experience was slightly over half of my professional career, which approached about 50 years. So.
And if I remember correctly, I mentioned this setting this up. Your door was kind of always open. And you were a guidance counselor.
In a lot of ways, yeah, there were many issues that would arise that had nothing to do with the classwork or broadcasting, or, hey, this program director didn't give me the shift I wanted, or any of that sort of thing. But yeah, typical day. Once I, made the trek from Linwood to Auburn, get there, handle, some of the managerial duties and responsibilities, meet with students as needed, prep for teaching the classes that I taught. But as I was saying, there were a number of times where there had to be a closed door session because a student was facing a particular challenge that actually had nothing to do with the coursework or, being on the radio or any of that sort of stuff. So, and all I could do is share my experiences and hope things would work out individually for each of those students. So
many affected. So many.
Mm-hmm.
I was positively affected by you, and I hid all of my deepest, darkest fears. So, yeah, just wonderful. And you could see it in the way the students look up to you and the way the radio station acted as a team. You retired in 2021, so just a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah, end of October of 21. One thing I'll mention with regards to kind of my approach was, while I was working still full-time in broadcasting, I was a program director at a radio station in Salt Lake City. And my overnight DJ was a student at the University of Utah and was taking communications classes. And he invited me to sit in the back of the room, one particular class session where the professor was teaching about the music business, playlists, and reporting to trade publications. So I went and quietly sat in the back, and the particular instructor was so far behind the times of what was actually happening on the ground in broadcasting. I walked out of there just shaking my head. And when the opportunity to teach at Green River came up, I always kept that in mind. Always try and stay on top of what's happening in the industry now. And one of the things that was great about people like Charlie and a number of my other students who went on to professional careers is I would stay in close touch with them and say, hey, what is the latest? What is going on? Plus all my other friends and acquaintances from the years in the broadcast field, trying to always be, on the cutting edge to the best of our ability and never, being like that professor back at Utah. So, and to being behind the times.
And to put it mildly, this has been a few decades of massive change in communications. And I was there for a little part of this. John, you've seen the most of it. If I had to get you to say, what are the biggest changes over the last 45 years, John? Like, the 80s came in, the 90s music scene exploded, and KGRG was a huge part of that. And then now we're in the 2020s, and maybe some more evolution. Podcasting has become huge. So as we look through all of this, is there a most exciting time you remember, John, where just big things were happening?
Well, probably the most exciting time, of course, is when we're just getting started. Just getting started in radio and technology, that was exciting for me. And as we've progressed over the years, certainly we went from records and reel-to-reel tapes to CDs. That was an exciting time, of course. High-quality music was more universal, readily available, mostly, and in a standard format that everybody enjoyed. Since then, the internet has really just hugely changed the way that we consume our music and the way that radio stations and any other music outlet has to distribute their program and their product. Maybe there's no more exciting time than the present. the studios used to be all, hand wired, analog cabling from point A to point B, and all this rat's nest of cabling in the back closet that nobody else would really look at or, want to look at for various reasons. And now you can pretty much plug a network cable into a studio and connect it to another studio, and away you go.
Yeah.
And that's certainly oversimplified, but this is an exciting time here with the changes that are available to broadcasting in the studios and distributing the content. There's so much to deal with now that there wasn't back in the day.
That's a great answer, especially from your point of view as the guy who had to find a broken wire. and now it's probably software that you can remotely access. But the other insight you have there is what an exciting time it is now. That's a great point, because students, people who want to communicate and tell stories and broadcast, podcast, whatever, they have never had such an ease of entry and more tools available to them. So to be surrounded by the current coaches and staff at the radio station and be encouraged now, like Tom, you always tried to stay ahead of the curves enough so that broadcasters would be prepared for where it was going. And I remember back when I was there in 2014-ish, I remember a student coming up to me and saying, "Do you think this podcasting thing will be a thing, or is it just a fad?" And you know what the three hardest words to say in the English language for a human being with an ego are?
I don't know.
I don't know. You heard me say that.
It's hard for me to say, Bob.
It's hard for anybody to say, I don't know, because they're asking you for an opinion. And I remember thinking, well, this podcast thing really does seem to have legs. Because they're created out of passion. They're created strictly out of a desire. We're not getting the big bucks this afternoon for this podcast, And that's how I started in radio. When I started in radio, I would have paid you. And that's how a lot of the, entry people into radio, high school, college, they're just so passionately in love with it. And it sort of feels like we're in that kind of a time again.
I agree. I follow podcasting, its growth. It's been tremendous, but really all the associated things as well. So you have people who are very much into broadcasting to a niche audience, which is something, back in the day, that was very difficult to do. I would often joke to students when I was teaching podcasting, well, you could have a thing aimed only at shepherders. And while there might only be a few in the greater Seattle area, when you think about that on an international level, globally, that changes everything. So that was something that Tom was clued into very early on in terms of the digital influence on what had been an analog medium. So we adopted that very early on. Tom, that was kind of the impetus for me being hired. Prior to being as an instructor at Green River College, I had worked for a couple years between leaving KGRG as a student and then returning. In those intervening years, I had a job at Microsoft working in streaming media in the late 90s. Bob, you were very helpful in me getting that job, as you know. But we have, from a very early point, adopted that growth mindset in terms of knowing that things are never going to be the status quo and looking for what the next thing might be. And it makes me so happy knowing that even though Tom and I have kind of stepped aside, John and company are doing a tremendous job keeping up that tradition.
Let's talk a little about. Oh, you go ahead, Tom. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to mention that I do remember when Charlie was teaching and started integrating podcast element with the students, and then it became a larger and larger and larger part of the syllabus as time went on, to the point where we actually ditched the in-studio training, and we concentrated on the FM for in-studio training. But Charlie wound up going full podcast instruction. And now we have the class that is the podcasting class that John handles.
And boy, there's such a need, because if you look at how many podcasts there are versus how many sound reasonably professional, the ratio is off the wall. And I think that, I think we're at a time of future growth. So part of me, nostalgically misses the old radio days and misses the radio station as it was. But part of me just imagines now almost being at the beginning of a gold rush for modern programs and communications that are even more deeply personal for people than the music shows, which were personal for me. I love music, but yeah, it seems like a great time now for the radio station, which is part of why we're celebrating 30 years to look forward into the future. I'd like to briefly talk about the 90s music explosion, because KGRG, and I believe, you were important to the record companies just to get records exposed in Seattle area to maybe get them on the commercial stations. So I think college radio, when I knew it back on the East Coast, was kind of ahead of the curve musically a little bit, because you could take more chances and therefore you could discover more music. Any cool stories about that, Tom?
Well, first things first, I want to mention an important name in the history of KGRG, and that's John Ramsey. John Kasprick knows John very well. Charlie also. But John preceded me as general manager of KGRG, and he, along with the students of the time, this was from the end of fall quarter of 1988, going into quarter of 1989, switched the format of the radio station from that album-oriented rock, which was called Valley Rock at the time, to today's rock, which was all this brand new music that simply being played on commercial radio. So, we know the names, Nirvana, Mudhoney, and all the rest of that era. So props to John and the students of that time to realize where music was headed and celebrating what became known as the grunge scene in the Pacific Northwest.
And didn't Nirvana even play like at the Student Center at one point? That's inconceivable to think.
Yeah, they did. Actually, it was a fundraiser for KGRG and the student newspaper, The Current. And it was May of 1989. And admission price was $5 if you bought a ticket in advance, or $6 at the door to see Nirvana on stage in the Lindblom Student Center. There is a series of home movie clips that if anybody dials up YouTube and punches in Nirvana and Green River College, you can view some video clips of that particular performance. $6, I can't get a popcorn at a show. Yeah, it's just hard to imagine.
Yes, lots of great history there, and KGRG was breaking ground and a part of it.
One of the beauties of I was going to say one of the beauties of the operation was that it was all student centered. So whether it was John or myself or now those who've come after me, we try and let the students make all the decisions in terms of music to be played, what song to play, what air shift, any of that sort of thing. And so it's really a tribute to them and their passion and love of music and discovering new artists that they could expose to the audience.
All right, there is a gentleman who should be here with us in the fifth box in this time capsule, who unfortunately is not. But I thought this would be a good time for each of us to pay a little tribute and remember him. And I'll start because when I got to Seattle at KISW in 1989, my newscaster was Jim Campy, who went on to be a teacher for many years at Green River and a mentor and an inspiration to every single person who met him. In my case, he helped me get some help I needed in an anonymous program, and literally rescued and changed my life in ways that can never be fully put into words. And then so it was a few years later that Tom invited me to be a guest and speak at Green River, and I caught this vibe that he had, this incredible. It's a support group. Every family is like a support group if it's somewhat functional. So Campy was literally one of the most important people in my entire life, and then he went there and began teaching. And there is, I'm sure every student he ever had still remembers being inspired by that. He had this way of greeting you all excited, and it was genuine excitement. And then he had this appreciation for every creative thing that anybody would do and would encourage you to take it even farther. So Campy is that's my name dropping spotlight on someone really amazing. And I think that, I don't know if I've understated or overstated it, but I think maybe we all feel very similarly.
I think that's right. One of the things that I can't help but think about when it comes to communications is the words are only a small part of it. When you are speaking, the more important thing is how someone feels when you say it. And Campy was remarkable at that. I think of so many times just the way I felt about the broadcast program. The way I felt about myself being around Campy was really indescribable. And his impact on our students through all those years, students still talk about him today with such love, with such reverence. He made a difference in so many lives. It was as though that's what he was supposed to be doing. And he left us way too soon. But in terms of leaving a legacy, in terms of making a true difference in lives, and Tom can speak about this, even going with students on recruiting trips. You can perhaps talk about a trip down to the Washington coast, Tom. Campy did it all, and he did it with such grace and such power, and it's sad he's gone, but it's also such joy that I think so many people have in their hearts when they think about Jim Campman.
All right, this is the spot for Tom.
Yeah.
Maybe the words don't come easy.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I just was reflecting on, the day by day and so forth when Campy was teaching multiple classes. He taught broadcast news writing. He taught production class and so forth. And he had a commute that was even farther than mine. Because he was up in Lake Stevens and driving down to Auburn. And I remember almost daily with my office door open, and I'd be at my desk and so forth, and he'd be there at my door and going in his inimitable way with his great voice going, "Sir Thomas," and saying, announcing his presence. And then we'd start chatting about, what's going on in our lives and what's going on with the radio station and the classes that day and so forth. And just what a wonderful, dear man that cared so much about everybody. It's so hard for me to put into words, what he meant to all the students and to me, personally. And Charlie referenced a particular story about Campy, which I think sums it up. There was a student who had a job opportunity interview that was down towards the coast, so I don't know if it was Aberdeen or somewhere down that way, and didn't have transportation. So Campy took it upon himself to drive the students all the way down to that community. And then the student, went through the interview process, and then Campy drove him home. I mean, just way above and beyond the call of duty. But that was him. That was Campy. And I'll never forget the day I got the phone call that he had passed, and it was just devastating news. And it was on a weekend, like a Saturday or something. And then I remember coming into the radio station on the Monday and having to gather all the students together and give the news. And it was just a heartbreaking, emotional time. But the thing about what he had done over the years at Green River with students, his legacy lives on even to this very day.
And good to have a record of our thoughts of this right now. John, I know how close you guys were, and because I remember it, and I remember meeting you. I think it was Campy that introduced me to you. And I was doing some fill-in teaching at the time. I was very nervous about it, by the way, but because of him, I felt like, just be supportive of everybody and let everybody's creative instincts take over. And so that's what he did for me. What did he do for you, John?
What Charlie and Tom have already said about Jim is all that needs to be said. But, I got to know Campy not as well as the others. And, he was one of the older guys that actually took my technology class. And he was in that class. And the nice thing about having Campy in the class is that he would offer some historical perspective of how things ran back in the day and give the students an appreciation for what we're doing then at the time. But I certainly remember the day that Campy didn't show up. And it was a hard day. Recently, we've had some alumni students come back and do some shows. And of course, the topic of that, a lot of the discussions, it was Campy. Many of these students were from the 2012, 2014 timeframe. And I was reminded that one of the phrases that Campy told a lot of the students, and this is an old Mark Twain phrase, if you find a job or a career that you love, you'll never end up working a day in your life. And that's something that I've chosen to live by. And I think a lot of the students that new campy still take that to heart and try to live their life in that way. And they're enjoying radio. They're enjoying what they're doing. They're getting paid for it, but they're not working as such. And I think that was probably, in my opinion, the greatest legacy that Campy could have left on the students.
And I just want to bring up, I think it's particularly appropriate. The four of us are here right now. I'm fairly certain the last time any of us saw him was when we were all together at Bob's place. And Campy was there as we were planning for an expansion of KGRG. He was highlighting some of the needs that the students had. He was advocating for them and advocating for the program. And what I found about that, and what I still think about, that man left it all on the table. There was not anything that he would not do for his friends, for his students, and he lived every day to the fullest. And he was there that day. He didn't have to be there, but he cared so much and so deeply, not only about the broadcast program, but particularly the students whose lives he was affecting. And that's something I often think about.
I remember that day too. Oh, and what I remember most about that day, because it was a sudden heart incident a few days later that took his life. But what I remember about that day is how happy he was. And, that's...
Got his dog Louie with him?
Yes.
Oh, Louie, yes.
His emotional support dog, who literally was an angel. I mean, I'm sure an angel. And he just gave me a big hug, and he was so happy for me and so just joyous. And that is an amazing memory. And I guess the reason to make a big deal out of it here is obviously for the four of us, this is a bit of a nostalgia ride, but it's also a little time capsule for anyone who might go to Green River and take the communications, broadcasting, podcasting, engineering classes, that you can know a little bit about the foundation of not just, the transmitter towers and we used to be in like a little double wide and then moved indoors, all of those things that happened over the years, but also just as an institution of higher learning and an institutional entity that had a sense of community, and we hope always has that sense of community going forward. It's an exciting time now. If you got this far in this podcast, you love broadcasting, first of all, because this is a little bit of history. And I guess what would be a great way to close out if each one of us, and I love putting everybody on the spot, and I'm happy to put myself on the spot first if you want a minute to think about it. Each one of us say something to the students of today and tomorrow, from the legacy of this radio station to what's ahead for you guys and what we hope and wish for you. I will go first if you want. Okay.
Go right ahead, Bob.
Okay. Well, I think of it as I mentioned earlier, a really golden opportunity now is there. The communications, distribution model, business models changed, but everybody has the ability to follow their dreams and follow their passions in the same spirit that KGRG has had over the last 4.5 decades. Everybody has a chance to do it now to potentially a wider audience, certainly a global audience. And as you were mentioning earlier, we can really pick things we're passionate about. We don't have to play a specific, mix of music to make a podcast. So to students listening now, I hope you hear some of the passion that all of us in radio brought to that. And it's storytelling, but it's also, if it's done right, it's brightening people's day, making their lives better. And that's what Tom brought. That's what all of you guys brought, but at Campy especially, and Charlie and John, this, how can you have a great experience entertaining people, making their lives better? So for students now, this is the history of the radio station. You are making tomorrow's history.
I think one of the things that I think about as I reflect back. It's been 27 years since I started at KGRG. It is a family. The people that you are taking these classes with, whether it's podcasting, broadcasting, engineering, these are your brothers and sisters. And I know that it may not always seem like that, but what I have found is that through the years, I find myself often in communications with people that I was in one broadcast class with back in 1996, that I would have never thought that at the time. And I see this happening generation after generation after generation at Green River College with the broadcasting program. Is there's a through line, and that thread is that they are family and connected to Green River, the program, but also something a lot deeper than any one college, any one radio station. We're there to support one another. We're there to be there for one another when things don't work out the way we necessarily wanted. And we're also looking out for each other. What's that next opportunity, or what success is there to be celebrated? And there is so much over the years.
Well, I think I'll let Tom go last.
He should be the headliner on this discussion. Yes.
I'll bat cleanup. Cleanup.
It's really difficult for me to answer that question, but things like do your best work, be the best you can be, and follow your passion, whatever topic or career that you want to pursue or discuss. Have a passion for it and do good. Always look at a positive side of things. There's always going to be a negative element out in the world. Don't get sucked in by it. Find the positive and promote that the best you can. And part of that, I wouldn't be an engineer if I didn't say, always do it in the best quality you have the ability to do it in. And barring that, just get your message out. So
wonderful. And then you left out, I remember engineers saying, is no food and drink on the console. That's the, I don't know if that still applies.
Right.
Yeah, well, there's that too.
Yeah. All right, John, thank you. Tom, you get to close us out.
There we go. Well, somebody once said, the more things change, the more they change. And I think in terms of everything, whether it's the broadcast business, any other field, society itself, there's always evolution and change. So my recommendation has always been be a lifelong learner. Continue to read, to communicate, talk, be mentored. However old you are, it doesn't matter. I still, even at my age, read a lot, and I'm still learning whatever the subject matter might be. I mean, many of you know that I was involved in adult amateur baseball for years. There are games that I will go to even recently where something new happened and I learned something new about baseball. I've been playing since, I was, 8 or 9 years old. So yeah, be a lifelong learner, try and surround yourself with all sorts of source material, people that you trust that can share new information, updated information, and so forth. The other thing I'll add is a slogan that I learned a long time ago, and it applies to so many areas of our lives. And it goes like this. If you're not getting better, you're getting worse, because there's no staying the same. So constantly strive to keep getting better, whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's your job, whether it's your relationships, whatever it may be, keep learning and keep getting better.
Well said. Thank you so much, everybody. This has been a pop-up podcast time capsule for KGRG, which is celebrating 37 years of the Today's Rock format. Also, almost 45 years from construction permit or license or all of those things. And, it's an institution, and in a short time, it'll be celebrating its 50th year. And we hope amazing things will be going on for all of you. John, Charlie, Tom, thank you so much.